The Bite Show is listener supported at thebiteshow.com.
Hello, everybody. This is Georgianne Hughes, and this is The Bite Show. And it is a real blessing to have with us Joseph P. Farrell.
Again,
yeah. Yeah, and we are going to talk about the Philosopher's Stone and the magic of social engineering. Oh, Joseph, there is some kind of magic in this social engineering.
Yes.
Because it is so widespread.
Well, yes. We hinted at that in the first two sessions, and
yes.
particularly in the one where I mentioned that there is a direct effect of consciousness on the physical medium.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Yes.
And what we're going to get into a bit, I hope, tonight, is to take that perspective and to see how it has been used in very mild forms of social engineering. Witness this very last election that I went on my rant about in the previous session.
Yes.
And I have to be upfront about that rant. About 95% of it was genuine passion. All right.
Yes.
But about 5% of it was contrived for a specific purpose, and we'll be getting into that tonight.
Okay.
But let's start with what I call the kind of mild alchemy, the mild magic of social engineering.
Okay.
If we examine that election result from another perspective, what you had boiling over was the frustration of the middle of center voter.
Yes.
With both parties not being able to get anything done unless it is some loony piece of legislation that fits some sort of ideological agenda.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, this actually is a technique of social engineering. And if we look at the ideologies of the two parties,
yes,
what we have is a kind of polarization. We've got a pair of dialectical opposites, all right?
Mm-hmm.
And they range, the whole spectrum from extreme left to extreme right. And what this does, Georgianne, and what people have to wake up and realize is that this is a kind of alchemy.
Okay.
Because you get two results from it. And I if you recall from my rant yesterday,
yeah,
we have an incoming group of Republithugs who, on one level are proposing sane things.
Yes.
Extending the tax cuts. I mean, my word, even President Kennedy knew that the last thing you do during a recession is raise taxes.
Yeah.
So you've got some sensible things, but I also went on a rant because you have a complete lack of vision in that if you have been following the rhetoric coming out of some of the Republican leaders in the House,
mm-hmm.
they are all in favor of passing more free trade agreements.
Oh, gee.
Yeah. Now, let's just stop and consider this nonsense. So this is an ideology at work.
Yeah.
But what I'm going to try and show is that some of this is suggestively, deliberately planned. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because what you have is what I call issues division and issues entanglement. In other words, you disentangle common sense approaches to certain issues and let one party take one half of an issue and represent that, and the other party represents the other half of the issue. You follow me?
Yes.
So that what you get out of it is an ideological deadlock. You follow me?
Yeah.
So this has been going on now with increasing frequency really ever since Jimmy Carter became president, and then on through the Reagan era, then in Reagan-Bush era, and then into President Clinton's administration. You get these increasingly wild ideological shifts, and instead of coming closer together, the two parties are moving further apart, and you get a resulting ideological deadlock. So let's look, for example, at this health care bill. It would be absolutely ruinous to the economy.
Yes.
But on the other hand, you have certain Democratic leaders that have always pointed out that free trade is not good. It has cost us jobs.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
And big time. And this is no longer an issue of, well, you're either for the corporations or you're for the unions. My word, we all remember what American cars were like back in the 1970s when they had no competition. They were very poorly made.
Yeah.
Okay? But on the other hand, this doesn't mean that we ship our automobile industry to Korea and China.
Yeah.
Because it's cheaper to build them over there.
Oh.
So in other words, you get a division of issues into halves of commonsensical approaches. One party represents a common sense approach to one half of the issue, but then picks up another half of an issue and goes completely nonsensical. The Republicans, in other words, in the middle of a recession, are following the wise policy of extending these tax cuts. But on the other hand, they are not following a wise policy, in my opinion, by entering into free trade agreements or extending free trade agreements that are going to make more and more American manufacturing jobs go overseas.
Or just go away, period.
Or just go away, period.
Yeah.
Yes, this is the problem. This is why I keep saying, look at how issues are divided between the two parties and look how issues are entangled in the two parties. This is the other part of the story. Because, again, the Republicans are right, in my opinion, on health care, all right? But this is all entangled in their vision with free trade. In other words, we are dealing with an alchemy here, where ideology gridlocks real solutions. This is why I proposed space in the previous session. Because this would be something, number one, that would stimulate the economy in the Keynesian fashion that the Democrats want to pursue. But the stimulus package they passed thus far has not worked. It's, the money's disappeared and nothing has happened. Mm-hmm. So in other words, we need to consider carefully that kind of approach, but do it with something that is going to pay long-term dividends, both in technology and in long-term economic security. This is why space is important. Because philosophically, it breaks this ideological deadlock. It is a kind of social engineering, but what we're doing is we are engineering the political parties rather than letting them engineer us into a box.
Yeah.
You follow me?
Yeah.
And it is something, I think, that both parties could agree upon. But this is a very, very key thing, Georgianne, that I want the listeners to understand. When you have this kind of ideological polarization, so that common sense approaches to issues seem to be divided between the two parties, and then once they're divided, they become entangled with an issue that's completely ludicrous.
Yeah.
You see? So you have the Republicans wanting to repeal health care, but in their ideology, it's entangled with free trade in the middle of a recession, okay?
Yeah.
Looney Tunes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? And on the other hand, you have the Democrats wanting to maintain that bill in its entirety, in all of its loony provisions.
Oh, boy.
And yet that's entangled with a common sense approach from some of the, I won't even mention names. People would probably stone me to death if I mentioned some of the names of the Democratic leaders that have been railing against this free trade policy for years.
Yeah.
Okay? But, this nonsensical issue is entangled with a commonsensical issue. You see?
Yeah.
So each party has, by dint of this ideological box, that they get themselves into. They've engineered a situation, their masters have engineered a situation in which each election gridlocks the fundamental issues that need to be addressed because neither party can disentangle them from those nonsensical issues. You see what's going on?
Yes.
So they're engineering a state where the people get frustrated.
Oh, yeah.
You see? And if we're not careful, it can blow up. There are some people that want that to happen. They want the system to gridlock to the point that nothing gets done, it collapses, and then they move in and impose a new one. This is social engineering at its best.
Yeah, I agree.
This is why, when I was ranting and raving, it was to a purpose. Because when we propose an issue, something that would create jobs, would benefit the nation technologically, would pay long-term investments, this is something that if you look at it closely, you could get both political parties, perhaps, to agree upon. This is kind of reverse engineering, reverse social engineering.
Yeah.
Okay, is that making sense?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
So anyway, that's kind of where we're starting. Now, all of this is very important because, as I said in, I think it was the second session, the physical medium, or God, or the ether, or the vacuum flux, whatever you want to call this thing, all right?
Okay.
Does respond to consciousness, or I think I said that there is a direct interface between consciousness and the physical medium.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
You have very serious physicists like Walker and even Wheeler and even Heisenberg wrote books on the implications of some aspects of the theory of quantum mechanics for consciousness.
Okay.
And let me explain why this is so important. Let's go to Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. It's this very, very basic principle within quantum mechanics. The principle says that you cannot measure the position of an electron at the same time that you measure its velocity. So in other words, even before you set up an experiment, you have already determined the outcome by your conscious choice of what it is you are going to look for.
Oh.
Now that's a whopper.
Yeah.
This is just a tiny, tiny step away from the Hindu doctrine that the material world, as we see it, is illusion. It's a kind of a hologram that is being projected by our consciousness. It's also just a step away from some of the doctrine that falls out of the Enlightenment philosophy of Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher, and then his disciple Arthur Schopenhauer.
Yes.
And in fact, Schopenhauer wrote a book, a very interesting title, The World as Will and Representation was the title of his philosophical treatise. You see? Yeah. So in other words, the physics that's coming out of Germany in the 19th and early 20th centuries has deep, deep philosophical roots. And in turn, that physics, because it has been so successful in its predictions from the theory is also saying that there is this direct link between the observer, the consciousness, and the physical medium.
Joseph, this is one reason why there's such a battle on for the thoughts, the mind.
Precisely. Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because this is exactly where I was going with this. Because the other implication of this is quantum mechanics is a statistical science. In other words, you cannot, in quantum mechanics, predict the behavior of an individual particle. And I said this in one of our Cosmic War series.
Yes.
Okay? But you can predict the aggregate behavior of a bunch of them statistically.
Yes.
And this is the same thing, I believe, that was behind the original science that lay behind the early astrological doctrines of Mesopotamia and Egypt and so on. Follow me?
Yes.
Because astrology back then was the belief in a mundane horoscope. In other words, kings had their court astrologers.
Yeah.
But the court astrologers were casting horoscopes not for the king as the individual, but for the king as the representative of the nation state.
Yeah.
Okay? So in other words, it was a prediction of the aggregate behavior of certain planets on the aggregate behavior of human beings.
Yes.
Plural, not singular.
Yes.
All right? So the bottom line then is that there is some sort of group multiplier effect on the physical medium. And let me give you an example. Prior to 9/11, the Princeton University has this experiment in consciousness going on where they have these brainwave meters all over the world, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Very sensitive instruments that pick up on aggregate brainwave activity.
Mm-hmm.
Now, interestingly enough, before 9/11 happened, brainwave activity spiked dramatically.
Yeah.
And then spiked after it happened.
Yes.
Okay? So in other words, there was kind of a pre-action, all right? There was something present, in other words, if for want of a better expression, in the ether,
Yeah.
that the aggregate human mind, if I can use that expression, picked up on, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's get to the real alchemy of social engineering then. I should mention in this session, since we took a political turn with the previous one and are taking a political turn with this one,
Yes.
that I have a new book. It's at the publisher now. It will be published by Adventures Unlimited Press. It is called LBJ and the Conspiracy to Kill Kennedy.
Oh.
All right? And in this book, I point out certain things about the assassination based on some very interesting research that a fellow by the name of Michael Hoffman published in a book called Secret Societies and Psychological Warfare.
Yeah.
If you look at certain aspects of the president's murder, the symbolism that you discover in it is very, very esoteric, and it cannot be accidental because there's too much of it.
Yeah.
You follow me?
Yeah.
There's too much of it. It was not only a well-planned assassination,
Mm-hmm.
it was not only a deeply rooted conspiracy, but it had, at a much, much deeper level than people can imagine, had a deeply esoteric and occult basis. It was designed as an alchemical, magical working to engineer the social consciousness of the country. And the way it was done, Georgianne, was to a certain extent to parade the fact that it was a conspiracy and everyone knew it, but the official version is ludicrous.
Yes.
Okay? That is a technique of social engineering and manipulation. In other words, what they're doing is saying, we got away with murder. They are literally thumbing their noses at you.
Yeah.
What you had is a secret cabal openly and brazenly step onto the stage of American political history, murder a president, and get away with it. But in planning this act, you see, they planned it so that it would have a precise effect on the group consciousness of the nation.
Mm.
That is magic.
Yes.
That is social engineering. There's little difference between the two. All right?
Okay.
The Bite Show is listener supported at thebiteshow.com.